The race has already begun for the White House in 2016. How do we discriminate the straight-talking candidates from the rest? Transactional analysis, developed by psychiatrist Eric Berne, can help. It can give us a way to look at the communication of candidates for the presidency to see if their interactions are dysfunctional and will be a barrier to their ability to work well with others, or if their transactions will be functional and more likely to lead to a straight-talking presidency. The first question to ask from a transaction analysis perspective to see if the candidates for the presidency will be functional or dysfunctional is, what is the ego state this candidate's behavior reflects? Parent ego state, adult ego state, or child ego state? Ego states reflect how we think, feel, and behave. We all have the potential to act from a parent ego state, an adult ego state, or a child ego state. One way we can tell which ego state a candidate is coming from is to listen to the words they use and to look at the nonverbal cues such as their posture, their tone, their gestures, their facial expressions to discern what ego state they are in. Dick Cheney, for instance, could be an example of someone behaving from the parent ego state. Someone in the parent ego state would make extensive use of authority and be more likely to announce decisions and be less likely to work collaboratively with those he considered beneath him. A person operating in the parent ego state might use threats, seek to control things rigidly, and give little freedom to others. Information in an administration of a parent ego state president would flow from top to bottom. It would be the parent ego state president who defined for the country what the problems are, what the objectives of the country would be, and what the strategies, plans would be to solve them. John Kennedy, for instance, would be an example of someone behaving from the adult ego state. When I think of John Kennedy, I think of an intellectual president, not a president who drove the country on the basis of fear, as a president in the parent ego state would, but a president whose intellectual system was separate from his emotional system, who would govern the country on the basis of thinking. A candidate for the presidency who embodied the adult ego state would focus on information gathering and make decisions only after a careful analysis of facts. If we asked him, "What is the evidence for your positions?" he would be able to answer in a straight-talking way. A president in the adult ego state would be more tentative and open to change when more information came in. He would be more apt to solicit input from Congress and the American people and be open to their definition of problems, their suggestions for solutions, and be more apt to work collaboratively in formulating objectives and strategies and plans, solutions in solving the nation's problems. Whereas a president behaving from the parent ego state would be driven by an unconscious connection to their own parents, acting in a manner that reflected their interpretation of how their own parents acted, a person acting in the adult ego state is more apt to live in the present and make an accurate, objective assessment of reality. So when we look at candidates for the presidency, the first question we must ask ourselves is, would this person be capable of acting in a straight-talking adult ego state? The third ego state a candidate might be in is the child ego state. When I think of the child ego state, I think of Barack Obama. A candidate in the child ego state might be impulsive, first going in this direction and then switching impulsively to go in another direction. He would be more apt to look to others to make decisions, to look, for instance, to the intelligence industrial complex to tell him what to do on national security, to look to Congress to come up with legislation in controversial areas. He wouldn't be good at setting objectives, and his administration would have no clear direction, but just sort of drift. He wouldn't be good at coming up with strategies to solve problems or in providing direction to others. So you'd see agencies like the Internal Revenue Service providing their own direction. Agencies like the Veteran Administration providing their own direction. Agencies like the Internal Revenue Service providing their own direction. There would seem to be no one in charge at the top. A president operating in the child ego state would let others do as they wished and wouldn't hold people accountable for what they did. In the child ego state, someone thinks, feels, and behaves much as they did as children. If they were a good little adaptive child who used withdrawal rather than compliance or rebellion, we might get a sense our president was absent a lot of the time. The ego states a person are in can further be differentiated. For instance, the parent ego state can be either the critical parent, Dick Cheney, or the nurturing parent, though both would have a top-down kind of administration, one being more critical, the other more nurturing. The child ego state could be either the free, natural child or the adapted child. What we need to look for in our new president is someone who operates from the adult ego state, but in an emergency might be able to employ the parent ego state when the situation required temporarily, might be able to employ the child ego state when creativity, spontaneity, and an open intimacy was required. As you can see, I'm not a perfectionist. I made a mistake on that last point, but I'm going to do this, send this out anyway. Also, there's another mistake in this script. Can you find it? Look for my new website, Straight Talking in Politics, which will be out soon.